We'll be starting in about 3 minutes. We'll be starting in about 3 minutes. Looking forward to it. Hey everyone, contact somebody and let them know tonight we're going to be talking about your vote. Do Black votes matter? So call someone that's been concerned about their vote. Call someone who's been complaining about all of this. We're going to talk about it tonight. So call somebody. Tell them to get online tonight. Tell them this is going to be a show that none like none other. Looking forward to it. 2 minutes to countdown. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am so excited about this evening's show. I am Dr. T. Lynn Smith, and this is My Political Faith. We are going to really engage in some conversation that's going to help you in the coming days. But before we get into all of that, let me say how excited I am to be here tonight. And let me give a big shout out to our CEO and President, Dr. Jacqueline King, Black Women Empowered. We are so excited to have this opportunity to share. And for those of you that don't know, Black Women Empowered is a wonderful ministry. And our motto is empowering the world through the ministry of Jesus Christ. That's our goal. That's our aim, to empower the world through the ministry of Jesus Christ. And of course, our CEO and President, Dr. Jacqueline King, we want to say thank you so very much for this opportunity to share, for this opportunity to come and to just express different views, different opinions. We are so grateful. For those of you that have not already, I would like to invite you to give to Black Women Empowered. You can certainly do that. The information is there on the screen, and all you have to do is make a donation. There is no particular amount, but we'd like for you to give your very best. Our programming is designed to be a blessing to others. Our programming is designed to help others. And when you give, it certainly does help someone else. When you bless Black Women Empowered, it blesses someone else. So your contributions certainly make it possible for others to do ministry. It feeds people. It just does so many things that empowers others to do ministry. So I'd like to encourage you to give to Black Women Empowered. Whatever amount that you would like to give, please do so. Tonight, we are so excited. I have actually 2 guests tonight that are going to share with us. And my first guest just recently relocated to the Ohio area. And he's a dear friend of mine who I met in ministry many years ago. Brother, Dr. Reverend Damien Conners. And he is going to be sharing with us tonight. Welcome, Damien. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Fantastic. Thank you for being here. It's great to have you here tonight. I know that you are a program officer and you do so many things with the SCLC and other entities. Just give me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll introduce our second guest.
Yes. So I currently work with the Kettering Foundation as a program officer. And it's a foundation that focuses its work on deliberative democracy. And the majority of my work centers around education and justice issues. As you know, I was the executive director of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and I was there for about 5 years. So the majority of my life and work has been between ministry and social justice. And I've switched that up a little bit to help support programs around the country that are concerned with democracy, that want to improve and enhance democratic practices across their organizations. And it's really fun, fascinating work. I get a chance to work with a lot of really great people. I have never seen a distinction between my faith life and my political life. I think that they work and go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And so I'm happy to do the work that I do. I try to wake up every day and operate in a way that's mission and purpose driven. And so I'm excited to be here tonight to talk a little bit more about that, but that's a little bit about me.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Our second guest is certainly no stranger to the world. You may know him as the other half of Ted and Sherry, but now he's doing his own thing as a solo artist. And Ted Nguyen is our second guest tonight. Ted is an amazing singer, certainly a man of God as well, and he loves politics. So welcome, Ted. How are you?
Hey, I'm well. How are you?
Great. It's been a long time, but it's good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. Glad you're doing well.
Yes, thank you. Ted, before we dive into this exciting conversation tonight, share with our listeners a little bit about who you are. And if you want to hum like one bar, that'll be okay. Okay, we'll allow it. Right.
So my name is Ted Nguyen. For those who don't know me, I'm a gospel singer, recording artist, songwriter, etc. But for the purpose of this particular engagement, I really have been vocal, outspoken, interested in trying to do my best to create conversations around social justice issues with people who might not really be aware of what's happening or might not be as connected as I would like for them to be. And so just trying to disseminate information that's helpful and helping all of us who are inside of faith community to understand that we too have a role to play as it relates to moving the needle forward and getting justice for every person in this country, irrespective of what they believe, how they look. None of that really matters. Like, as citizens of this country, we have a responsibility to just make sure that everybody is treated equally and equitably. And so that's really where my heart and my passion lie at this point. And I have also I'm in the middle of, towards the end actually, of working on a social justice project to really kind of highlight some of these issues. And for those who care, Ted and Sherry,
we care.
Are in the process of a reunion project as well. So there's a lot of music happening right now. So I'm excited about all of those things.
Excellent. Well, that is so fantastic. I'm glad to have both of you. Last week I was on the show and I talked to an educator about some organizations working to provide emotional health and support to our youth today. Mm-hmm. And tonight I want to continue this conversation as it relates to civic engagement. And for those that, don't do a lot with civic engagement, certainly it involves working to make a difference in the civic life of our community and developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motives to make a difference in everything that we do. And so I'd like to begin by simply asking this question. Education, certainly it has changed, and the way we're doing it now is certainly very different. Why is the education of Black youth important to democracy and to justice? Damien, if you want to start out and talk a little bit about that, that'd be great. But why is education of Black youth important to democracy and to justice?
Yeah. So I think for a very long time, it was the intentional effort of the United States government of local governments, of people who did not want Black people to succeed, to lock them out of opportunities. And one of the ways that that happened was through education. So from the time of slavery, Black people weren't allowed to receive formal education. Post-slavery, Black people were, of course, segregated, not sharing, but still not able to kind of maintain their own spaces without fear of reprisal or violence, but also, weren't allowed to have access to full education, particularly that provided by the state. And so there's a long history of Black people being kind of cast to the side, as we know, but also being denied full access to education. And arguably one of the challenges there is that it did not provide them with the kind of substance they needed to pursue their dreams, the things that they wanted to accomplish, the things that they were interested in. I mean, many Black people did accomplish a lot without formal education, but the doors of institutions that were run by the state were closed to Black people, i.e. schools. And so some sat on the outside of the school to just kind of hear into what was happening. But we know that there's the history there. And so, not allowing Black folks to have access to education, to knowledge that would help them achieve the things that they needed to make a living for themselves and their families, and then locking them out of job opportunities was a part of the kind of American fabric and infrastructure as to keep Black people in their place, right? So we see that happen across our history, post-slavery, into Reconstruction, Black codes, Jim Crow, and what folks were fighting for and against in the 60s. Then you see in 1955, Brown v. Board of Education, where there was an attempt at, integrating schools, but that wasn't really successful. And so we see how, your zip code really matters to the type of environment you live in and the education that you receive. And Dr. King, I believe, said that, education is important because the purpose that it serves is that it helps save people from the morass of propaganda, right? And so people can be easily swayed if they don't have the tools to do the work of logic, to address issues in kind of unbiased and objective ways. So that's a challenge. I think that Black people, though, have been very resilient and have been able to do that in ways by cues from their experience. So at their education, their formal education in many instances, or our formal education in many respects, have been through our experiences, and being able to read the signs of the time and the moment, and to do that in a way that helped preserve life. But it becomes really, really, really important now, given that we have different levels of access, primarily because, it's easy to be swayed by, propaganda that's coming from foreign enemies, but also propaganda that's emerging from within our communities by people who are planted there. And some of those people look like us. So we need to have the skills, the tools to be able to deduce logically, scientifically, what would lead us to make more sound decisions for ourselves, our families, and our communities. And that for me, that's the importance of education for Black youth, that they have the capacity to do what is necessary to not only to make a living and to make a good home for their families, but to also make decisions that are in their best interest and in our best interest. But I guess that's where I'll leave it. I think that it's really important for Black youth to have those tools and to be able to, decipher on the news what's true from what's false, and use those tools as a way to make sound decisions for themselves, their families, and the community.
Certainly. And before I ask you to speak on that, Ted, I'd like to say to our audience tonight, we're going to certainly engage you. So we'll be asking you some questions. We want you to make some comments about what you're hearing. And certainly these great young men are going to, with me, answer any questions that you have, settle any anxieties that you have about some things that are going on. Damien, as you were talking, what I was thinking about is, yes, they didn't allow our forefathers to have education per se, but gosh, all the inventions that we made certainly play a big role in everything that's going on now. Ted, you want to jump in there and say anything regarding that?
Well, I would say that I think to the point you just made, like Black people have, by necessity, been innovative since we've been in this country. And I think that there's not enough conversation, in my opinion, around that to really highlight the ways in which we've been contributors to the success of America in really large and significant ways. As it relates to the education conversation, I do think that, information is valuable. And so I think that those persons who were intentional about locking Black people out of institutions of education, or quote unquote formal education, were doing so because they didn't want us to have the knowledge base to be able to compete, to be aware of the ways in which we were systemically locked out, to be able to have the tools to undo that, to raise the types of conversations we need to have to say, hey, this is wrong. And to be able to articulate that in ways that were deemed intellectually astute, right? So some people have their ways of saying things. We might call them ebonics or slang or what have you. But the point of any, communication is to convey a thought, and so people understand it. And so sometimes we were locked out because they didn't want us to be able to say things in a certain way, right? So that we could really be convincing and present what some would seem to say is a suitable argument. I think that, I did a class, I was a speaker at a class of young boys a couple of years ago in Atlanta. And I was talking to them about the music business and how important it is, if you're going to be in it, to understand the business side. So at the beginning of the class, everybody wanted to be an artist, per them.
Right, of course.
I explained how the royalties were earned. Like if you were a songwriter versus an artist, by the time I got to the end of the presentation, most people want to say, oh, I want to be a songwriter now because I don't have the bills to pay, etc. So as a test, I said, and before I started this, I'm going to review this at the end. They're 9, 10. They're like, okay. So at the end of the presentation, I asked a question. One of the young gentlemen raised his hand, answered the question correctly. I told him to come to the front of the class, and I gave him $20. Now you can imagine what happened when I asked the second question.
Yeah.
Right. So everybody's hand went up, and I said, "Well, this is the what I'm trying to teach you today. That even if you don't feel it, if it is in that moment, information is valuable, and it's important to learn and to grow. So whether that be through an institution, whether that be through talking to people, through your own reading, through self-education, to just being aware of what's happening, it really is important. So I do think for young people who have traditionally been those who really were the feet of political movements and who really were instrumental in, marches and really putting their bodies out there on the line to affect change, it's important that those people are educated about what, and I'm not saying they aren't, but it's important that they be educated about what they're doing, understand all the mechanisms that are in play, understand how to move inside those mechanisms, to deconstruct the things we need to build things where we need to, and maybe a little bit of both in some instances. Mm-hmm. So I think that education is important for young people. But again, I want to be very clear that doesn't necessarily look a certain way. It doesn't mean you have to go to, XY college or what have you to be educated. Yeah, so I think some of that also may be some of what we need to do is really understand what education is, why it's important, so that people are equipped. I have this conversation with my nephews all the time, and one of them, was sending me all these things from social media, like everything was a conspiracy and 5G and it was just so much stuff. And I told him, I said, whoa, hold up. Like you're annoying me, right? What I want you to do really is take some time to actually read and do your own research before you send me a sound bite or some caption that someone has sent that you have not vetted, you've not proved it, you've not done anything to verify this. And I said, people are so easily led astray because they don't read, they don't study on their own, they don't do their own research. And that's why it is so important for us to, those of us who are trying to do this work, to educate young people, to allow them to educate us if need be in some instances, but just have a free flow of information, an exchange of information so that we can all grow and move forward and be better together.
Ted, that is so important. And one thing, I know you want to jump back in, Damien, but here's what I do. There are so many news outlets that share so much information. So I try to make sure that I get a little bit from all of them so that you can see what each perspective is. And that way we have to also make sure that our young people are getting different perspectives, like you just said, because if I sit only in at one table, I'm only going to eat one kind of food. And so it's important that we make opportunities for our young people to have outlets to hear different people speaking, to hear different views and opinions, because otherwise they'll be one-sided. I had a conversation recently with my mother about something. My mother is 81. And so we were just talking about, how can we help our grandchildren, nieces, and nephews really understand the whole broad picture. And the only way that we can do that is making sure that they have several voices, that they don't just hear one voice, but they hear several voices. Damien, I know you want to jump in.
Yeah, no, what I have to say, I don't know how to jump rope like that, but it dovetails well with what you and Ted raised. And it's just around community participation in education and the role of the community. And one of the things that comes to mind, or that came to mind, was that we as people in the community who have a degree of stewardship over the lives of and young people, is that it's important for us to share our stories, because I think about the fact that there were a lot of Black folks who couldn't formally read, but they were able to read their context, their environment, and they were able to decipher from their experience. This is a different kind of reading. How to inform your children about how to maneuver through life, but also it informed them how to move through life and how to make choices that were in their best interest. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to share, our stories, our history, what actually happened with our kids, so that they know, you won't make it on your own, number one, and that there are people who have come before you who have done a lot to make sure that you can enjoy some of the freedoms that you enjoy. And I think that is really meaningful to how community plays a role in the education of young Black people. But also there's this other thing, and Ted, I think I mentioned this to you before, but there's an essay in this book called Deeper Shades of Purple, and it's by Kelly Brown Douglas, and she uses this term, epistemological privileging, where she talks about how she privileges the knowledge and the wisdom that came from the elder women of the community. And that falls outside of the norms or the tradition, how we traditionally understand knowledge to be passed on or transferred, right? Like we suppose that it's supposed to be in a book, and it's supposed to be an old white man, some philosopher who said something that's authoritative. But I think that we have to start taking our cues from ourselves and place the authority in our community, so that, when we have the opportunities to privilege the knowledge of our great aunts and grandmothers and grandfathers, those folks who have that kind of embedded wisdom that's connected to like real life experience, I think that we'll begin to shape our young people in ways that we can't even imagine what they'll do with those types of tools and resources. And that's more to Ted's point about the ability to kind of objectively engage information, and to your point, T-Lynn, and do it in a way that you have these facts behind you, but you also have the internal tools and makeup to be able to interpret information.
Absolutely. Talking about the community and what role the community plays in the education of our children, but a little further than that, or a little deeper than that. Both of you are musical. Both of you sing, excellently. Much of our music is one of the ways that we tell our story. And it has been one of the ways that we've told our story down through the years. And so I work on a training college, and they're learning, these are adults who are learning the books of the Bible, but they're learning them with music. And so with that in mind, maybe one of the things, and Ted, I want you to talk about your project, maybe what we could also offer and maybe just really reinforce with the community is that we can use music as the medium and arts to really help our Black youth tell their story. Ted, jump on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, music is an important medium to get across stories, to convey messages, and I always think of songs as the narration of many movies. It's how I think about them. So I feel like a great song, at least for me, always creates a visual in my head. I can imagine exactly what is happening, what is being said. And I think to that point, I'm going to take a little bit of a turn and come back. That's why I think it's so important, specifically for those who are watching who are consumers of gospel music, that we're very careful and intentional about being inclusive of all the expressions inside of gospel music, and that we don't lose any of those, right? Because worship music is music that really celebrates God and the awesomeness of God, etc. But it's not usually something that is about an individual narrative. So I think that it's really important to understand that it's important to tell about our own experiences with God and what those experiences have been, and chronicle that through our music, because that's how a lot of people understand, God to show up in certain specific ways in their lives. And so I think it's very important for us to be mindful of that as we are writing new music, and as we are continuing to celebrate older music, that we don't lose the music from our past as well, because that was very key to the foundations of who we all are, and the shoulders we all stand on. So I think whether we're talking about gospel music, hip hop, R&B, doesn't really matter. The music of Black folks has always been very significant when it comes to telling our stories and teaching lessons, and just incorporating our experiences inside these lyric melodies, so that we have ways of communicating that. And I think that's why our expressions are so unique. And if you look at the history of our creation in this country, if we're honest about it, Black people created gospel music and blues and ragtime and hip hop and R&B and jazz and rock, right? These are all created. It's just true. Like, these are all creations of God. And so I think that we have clearly been instrumental in influencing the world over as it relates to music and different types of musical expressions. And so I think it's very important for us to continue that part of our own legacy as a people group, and not lose it. When I say lose it, I mean to be connected to the history of it, where it's come from, how it's gotten here, and continue to build on it. So I think music has been, is, and will continue to be a very important tool. One of the sources of inspiration I've been listening to, or have been listening to, for my own project, was some of the music that Marvin Gaye did with. I actually redid one of his songs called Inner City Blues, and unfortunately, I mean, he released it 49 years ago, and all the lyrics are still appropriate today, which is horrible. But when he did Mercy, Mercy Me and What's Going On and all these other songs, he got pushed back from the label. Actually, they were like, nobody wants to really hear about this. But I think that clearly they did, because everything in our lives is not a love story, right? Everything in our lives doesn't have a happy ending. It's just true. And I think it's okay to be able to say sometimes it just doesn't work out the way you wanted it to, right? But choice is yours to learn from it, to grow from it, to soldier on, and hopefully educate somebody else in the process. So music is, I think, a really important component of our expression, of our teaching, of our messaging, and we should be very intentional about making sure we maintain that.
Two things. Certainly the Bible has been the example of sometimes they got the promise and sometimes they didn't. And that's certainly true now. I'd like to ask the audience, have any of you out there had an opportunity to allow your children to be engaged in music in such a way that helps them work through any issues that they're dealing with? Music that will help them, put a smile on their face, or music that will help them get through bullying and those kinds of things that are happening. So all of you that are listening, if you have worked with children, or your children have done anything musically that has helped them to soldier on or to be a better student, share that with us at this time. Ted, you've got to sing a little bit of the song that you mentioned before we go on. I'm not going to go any further. I'm just going to say anything else until you sing a little bit. Just
really?
Yes.
Oh God. So the first part of it is rockets, moonshots, spend it on the have-nots. So go to the holler, waiting to my life. All right, y'all got it.
Now, you know what, though? You have to do it again.
I'm sorry, what?
It said you froze for a quick second, so you have to do it again. Wow.
He's frozen.
Wow. All right. Well, he'll come back. So we'll get him before it's all over. Damien, typically people of color vote for a particular party based on original issues, basic issues, and for the most part, the evangelical church, that community, they vote for anti-abortion. However, they turn their heads and give passes when Black people are killed. The Black church, on the other hand, struggles in a lot of areas. And so what can we say to people that are so stuck on one issue and then they won't vote on the issues that will impact them in a greater way or give them greater freedom? What can we say to people? How can we engage them? And in that way helps us to understand why the Black vote is so important in this election cycle.
Yep. So that's a difficult one because I don't know, and I don't know that anyone's cracked the code on that yet. But what I will say is that when we go to the grocery store, we don't buy just one item, right? So when we go, we don't buy a basket full of steak and don't buy any water, no vegetables, no other thing. And I think the same is the case for us when it comes to voting and how we engage around issues, right? We're more than just one issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and this is the point about education in my mind, when you're thinking critically and logically about how your life unfolds over time, right? You realize that you don't only have to go to the doctor's office, but occasionally you have to go get gas for your car, right? And all of these things are impacted by the decisions that we make when we go to the ballot and we vote for certain people who believe certain things. So if you want to complain about gas prices, if you want to complain about healthcare costs, if you want to complain about all the things that impact your life, even groceries, etc., then you have to be conscious about the people who are the decision makers. And I think it's also important that people get engaged locally in solving challenges and issues with their neighbors because it gives them more insight to how the process of making a decision around what's in the best interest for me and my family and my community, right? So they're the small challenges that people come in contact with on a regular basis that they have to deliberate about, that they have to make decisions about with their neighbors, I think that folks should use those moments as opportunities to learn about what it means to make decisions that impact your whole life, right? And our lives are not confined to any one issue. Our lives are not confined to, whether or not our neighbor down the street gets an abortion, right? It's not confined to whether or not the neighbor on the other side is LGBTQA, whatever, so there are all of these things that become these hot button issues in many ways that, will dissuade folks from voting. And I think to a great degree, those are the things that can sometimes fall into the propaganda bucket and kind of take us off task. And we forget the fact that the folks that we've elected then have the opportunity to say yay or nay to whether or not, a president elects or selects judges to fill up, federal seats. And then our communities, our children, have to have, at the end of the day, are subject to the decisions that those folks make in a kind of cascading way, of course, work. But, I think that we really have to, I don't know what to say to folks, to be honest. Over time, for me, it's just been being in conversation with people to help them see that, voting is not about one issue. Voting is about like a number of issues that impact every area of your life, every area of your family's life, your children, your grandchildren, and so forth and so on. But
that's so important, and especially for people of faith. You know, many times we get stuck on one issue, and if that party is with us on that one issue, that's where we hold our loyalty. But then there are so many other issues that affect us down the road. If they appoint all these judges that are going to incarcerate our children, that are going to cause our Black boys to be killed, Black girls to be killed, but they were against abortion, so that's why I did it. Really, one issue, and there are 9 other issues that are going to affect us down the road. People of faith, I want us to really be mindful that we know everything that's behind door number 1. As we look at
one more thing that came to mind as you were talking,
yes,
just the response to many pro-life people who are, you know, pro-life when it comes to the fetus, but not pro-life when folks are alive and moving along the street, you know. So to the point you made earlier, you know, you have folks being pulled over by the cops. We're the pro-life people. You know, we're the folks who are claiming they're pro-life then, you know, and when we say Black Lives Matter, you know, we're the pro-life people. And so I think that in many respects, it becomes a convenient argument to say that someone's pro-life because it may feel good. You know, it feels good. It's something that people can like kind of hitch their hat on. They can play sanctimonious and, you know, and operate like the holy rollers, so to speak. But I think at the end of the day, we have to look at our reality. And I feel like sometimes we just, when it comes time to make a decision that may involve our faith or our beliefs, then we leave the reality at the door, and then we just kind of bypass it. And that for me is what's most baffling. But to the point I made earlier, I still haven't cracked the code on how to get people to think beyond just single issues.
Certainly. Ted, I asked Damien, why is the Black vote so uniquely important during this election cycle? Do you want to make a comment on that? I know you're...
Yeah, apologize. I don't know, Google Fiber. I think that it's important.
It's a 5G conspiracy. It's a 5G conspiracy.
Yes, that's what it is. It's important because our very lives and existence and the way that we live is after the election of.
It's frozen again.
Frozen again. I think he was going to say after the election of Barack Obama, we kind of relaxed. I don't know that that's what he was going to say, but it would make sense that that's what he was going to say.
Am I back?
Yeah. You're back.
Okay. I'm going to try to like switch my Wi-Fi or something because something weird has happened. But that with Barack Obama's election, people thought, we were post-racial, we've moved past that, but that's just not the case. And so I think that we have to look at the fact that in 2008, 2012, Barack Obama did not get the majority of white vote at the time. People thought he did because he won, but he didn't. And I think that we have to look at where we are and what's affecting our lives. We have to look at the fact that, Tip O'Neill, some who know that is the Speaker of the House years ago, he said something that I've never forgotten, even as a kid. He said, all politics is local. And I think we don't have enough conversations around that in terms of how that affects Black people. I live in Atlanta. If I get pulled over by the police, whatever's happening on the federal level is not what's going to, determine how I'm treated. It's going to be what's happening in my city, what the city council has said, what the city ordinances are, what those codes are, what happens with the Atlanta Police Department. And that's what's really important, because that's what's going to affect you most, right? And most immediately. In the city of Atlanta, they have done away with cash bonds for certain things. So that's a real life effect on a lot of poor people who don't have to pay bonds anymore for nonviolent offenses. And so I think that we have to think about our the way that the country is set up and how things impact our everyday lives. And so it is very, 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 very important to be engaged. And if we look at what's happening from the top, from the president on down, I mean, it's very, here's the thing, like, in my opinion, like folks on the right or Republicans, conservatives, probably since the late 60s or so, have been people that have not really been moving in the interest of Black people on a lot of issues. However, because racism is sophisticated and it's nuanced and it's, they put a pretty bow on it, a lot of folks have not recognized it for what it really is. And what we're seeing is not something new.
Right.
What we're seeing is Donald Trump is an elephant in a china shop. And he doesn't have the political astuteness to be nuanced. He doesn't know what to say publicly and what not to say. He doesn't know how to articulate things in a way that's presentable and palatable and doesn't upset everything. But the truth is, he's not really misaligned from what their agenda has always been. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we have to understand. And so in a way, this is something that can be useful to us if we really stop and understand what has always been happening. Police shooting Black folks is not new. We just have cameras now. We just see it on video. This is not new. I mean, you think about the ways in which Black people have been not just shot, but lynched and railroaded and falsely accused. I mean, this goes all the way back to Emmett Till and beyond. So this is nothing new in America, what we're saying. People are like, it's just so bad and I want to go back. No, it's just we are where we need to be. We're at a point of reckoning and we have to have real hard conversations about where we are and how we intend to move forward. Mm-hmm. I may be different than you two. I'm also a believer in having to understand who's with me and who's not. Right? Who's against me, who's for me. I'm not trying to fight you. Like, I'm not really here for that, but I just want to be aware so I know how to move. So I know what's important to protect the people who in this country, Black, white, doesn't matter, who are on the side of what is right, what's progressive, what is equitable. And I want to be clear, all white people are not on the side of what's wrong or, trying to harm us. And not all Black people are doing things that are for us, right? So we have to really take people as individuals, treat them as individuals, and I think respond in kind, but we have to be really engaged in this political process and do the best we can to educate ourselves, educate our neighbors, our family members, and just help people to understand how important it is to put people in political positions who have our best interests at heart, who understand how to will the institutions of government in ways that will help us. And once those persons are elected, we also have to stay engaged to hold their feet to the fire to make sure they deliver for us. You can't just vote and that's it. Yeah. It's an ongoing process because this is my last thing. Politics literally affects every area of your life. For those who are like, I'm just not into politics, don't say that because it's not smart. It ain't hot, right? When you walk outside, if the air is clean that you breathe, it's a political decision because somebody's determining what pollutants can be in the air, how safe it is. When you turn your water on, do you have lead like you do in Flint, or do you have water that you can drink? It's a political decision. When you talk about your taxes, if you hit a pothole in your car, does the city fix it or not? When you talk about healthcare, when you talk about just fair wages, when you talk about where you can live, when you talk about environmental safety, I mean, everything that happens in this country that affects us is based on a political decision for the most part. So you can't say I'm not into politics because it literally affects everything from the air you breathe, the water you drink, to is it safe to get on the airplane you get on and fly, right?
Let me ask the audience, how many of you agree that your whole life is governed by politics? If you agree, type I agree. If you disagree, type I disagree. I'd like to see how many of you agree or disagree with that. But that's good. That's certainly something that we need to be mindful of, and I'm glad you lifted it up. Damien, I know you want to jump in real quick, and then I'm going to move on.
I just can say amen and co-sign what Ted said. That's it.
Ted has spoken. Amen. Okay, so here we are. We're a couple months away from the election. What can we offer to our audience? What can we do to help make sure our votes count? I know early on I did have someone here from the census, that whole thing, but what can we do individually, community-wise, to make sure our vote counts? Ted, I'll start with you. Damien, I'll let you close it out.
I think individually, I think that we have to take some time to do research on the candidates who are running in all of our elections, whether they be local, state, county, federal, whatever they are. Make sure you do research on the candidates. Choose the person who you feel like will do the best for the community and those people who are going to be most adversely affected by those decisions. And I think that's another thing too. Like voting for, in my opinion, should not just be about you, right? I understand you have your own whatever, but it really should be about people who are like, I am a Black man, and so I vote, but I want to think about how these policies will affect women, how they will affect children, how they will affect immigrants, etc. Right? And so I think that as we're having these conversations about who to push the button for and how our votes can matter and why they do matter, I think we have to consider all the people who will be affected by those decisions. Take a little time to do the research. Show up. If you feel like you're not going to be able to make it, vote early. Whatever works in your state. Find out what's happening and be an informed voter.
That's good. I see a lot of people are agreeing with the statements that you made earlier. I don't have anyone that disagrees at this time. So you're in light company. Damien, what can we do?
I think folks can, number one, get as informed as possible. And I think Ted mentioned that. And there's some simple ways to do that by going to your Secretary of State website. If there's sample ballots for the upcoming election there, get familiar with who's on the ballot. Do your research person by person. It's what I do every election. I go through person by person, however many people are running for a position. I check out their history. I check out the decisions they made. I check out their platforms. And all of those things are super important because, to the point, the Tip O'Neill quote about all politics being local is that ultimately we make the decisions about what happens in our lives. So from the very personal level, you start there and you extend that up through your voting, right? Everything has to do, to Ted's point, with the decisions that you determine and decide to make. So going to the Secretary of State website, making sure you're registered, making sure that the registrar or the Secretary of State, whoever in whatever state you live in, if the Secretary of State holds that information, get that information from there, or your local, I forget what they call it, the offices that have that information, but just you can find all that information is easy to find online. So make sure you're registered. And then for the folks who in this particular election season who are thinking about mailing in their votes, to make sure that they know all of the rules. So for instance, in the state of Georgia, you have to first apply for a ballot and then get a ballot. So not to be confused with that process. And I do know that there are seniors across the state in Georgia who will have to participate in that way. So if you know a senior, make sure that they've applied for their mail-in ballot, that they have received the ballot, and that for each they have a stamp for it. And I know that there are some efforts locally, particularly in the Atlanta area, with folks attempting to do that. And also get engaged in your community, right? That's the starting point. You make decisions for your homes every single day, what you're going to eat, how you're going to pay the bills, lights, etc. If you have prescriptions, if you have, environmental challenges, if there's waste outside of your house, you notice those things, and you have as a citizen of the United States in whatever city you live in, you have the right to voice your desire for a clean environment. And you also have to go to work every day to supply for your needs. So we're making personal decisions on a regular basis. So get started locally. If there are things that are going on in your community that you don't agree with, or maybe that you do agree with, make sure that you partner with your neighbors to talk about how to address those challenges, if there are challenges, or how to amplify something that you think is going well. And that's a starting point. And I think it's almost a finishing point too, because it's directly connected to the decisions you make on a kind of scaffold level about what happens very locally, community, what happens locally in your city, what happens in your county, what happens in your state, what happens in the country. And if you are genuinely concerned about Black lives and Black people and your religion and whether or not you can go to church, and for all the people who want to go back to church, we could have been back there had we done the right thing in 2016, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yes.
And so those things really matter. And I think about, and I'll stop on this point, the fact that when, I'm not trying to make political plugs here, but I just want to speak to the reality. When Barack Obama was in office, he and his administration set up an office specifically to deal with potential pandemics and epidemics and issues that would impact the country in this way. It was the next president, the current president, who came in and, dissolved the entire office And here we are. So we need to be able to decipher, who has our best interest at heart. And so the people who voted or did not vote in 2016 are examples of like an abdication of responsibility. We have the response. We cannot just, well, we could, but I wouldn't come home and say like, oh, I'm just not going to pay this light bill. I'm just not going to clean. I'm not going to wash any dishes. I'm not going to wash my body. I'm not going to go to work. I would be homeless and dirty, and that is not the choice that most people make. So I would just say extend that to how you make your decisions around your politics. And I remember my very first political science class, my professor said, politics, it simply means the negotiation of power, right? So how are you negotiating on a day-to-day basis, how you get your basic and bare necessities so that you can live in a way that you think is dignified? So that's what I'm thinking. I just know that if you start very personally in the decisions you make for yourself, you would just want to extend that and think about that in the context of voting.
I want to make one of the quick points to the point you made about people understanding, knowing if you're registered to vote, how to get your ballot, etc. Also, and I say this in a very serious way, if you've had issues, any legal issues, you also want to make sure that you can vote. Yeah. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you go to vote and you're not supposed to, and then you have other legal challenges, because they have been very, the ways they've handled it have been very interesting as it relates to Black people who didn't know they were supposed to vote, who were trying to. So if you know you have some challenges, check that out as well.
Let me just say this as well. Not voting certainly does affect every area of your life. If you sit home and say, you know what, I don't like A or B, that does impact you, because every vote, whether you believe it or not, whether you think they've already rigged the election or not, every vote does count. And so I just want to encourage each of you, no matter what, make and cast your vote. That is so important.
Take somebody with you.
Yeah. Right. The other thing is we have to hold our politicians accountable. Once we vote them in, we've got to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do. And that's been the beauty of the protests that we've been having, at least the peaceful ones. We're trying to hold people accountable. So when your person doesn't win, okay, so then you say, all right, this other person won, but this is the issue that we needed to have, that we voted on. This is the issue that is in the forefront. Now I'm going to hold you accountable by calling you every day, calling the senator's office, calling the Congress, calling whoever, the alderman, every freaking day. T. Lynn Smith is calling that office at 9 to 5, whatever it is, to make sure that whatever you said you were going to do, that you do. I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories that when you get your ballot in the mail, they're marked D or R. So if this is true, just make sure when you get yours in the mail that if you are a D, it says D. If you are an R, it says R, so that there's no mistake, that it doesn't go to the other pile, whatever the case is. There were all kinds of things that were said in the primary election, that when people went to vote, it changed over to a different party. So just make sure that when you go to vote, number one, you have ample time. I personally am going to early vote. I did request a ballot by mail, but I don't trust it. So I am going to early vote. Now, that's just me. I'm not saying that you send your ballot in, happy for you. I am going to early vote because I feel like then certainly my vote will be counted. But whatever way you need to vote, all I can say is go and vote, because your vote does matter. Hold people accountable, as you guys have said. Do your research so you know about more than just one issue. Especially to my faith believers, it's important that you look beyond the one issue that's driving you. Look beyond that one issue, because Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, so many are dead now because we didn't look beyond the one issue. And so I just want to say that your vote certainly does count. Black votes do matter, but you've got to cast one. It's only going to matter if you cast it. I'd like to give you guys like 30 seconds to give a closing remark. Ted, you got to sing again because it worked before. So that's got to be your close or part of your close.
All right.
A new project. So I'll be quiet. I'll talk slow so that nothing buffers. So
All right, so I sang a little bit of the Marvin Gaye song. I'll do a little bit of that. The song says, rockets, moonshots, spend it on the have-nots. Money, we make it. Before we see it, you take it. Oh, makes me want to holler the way they do my life. And that's where we still are today.
love it.
Still
Yeah.
And so in closing, I want to really thank you, T-Lynn. Thank you, Damien, for this platform. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for allowing me to say something on here. Hopefully people are inspired to get involved. If you're not, if you are, stay involved, do all that you can, and never think that your platform is too small. I don't care if you have, 100 people or 200 people following you. Somebody's listening to what you have to say. Your voice matters, even if it's just people in your family or your friend group or people you work with. Just help people to come along with you and be a part of this process, because we really all have to engage it very seriously, because our lives and the quality of our lives are dependent on it.
Thank you. Damien?
So one of my favorite scholars, thinkers is Eddie Glaude, and he just wrote a book entitled.
Sing too if you want to.
Oh no, I'm okay. We'll leave that to professionals. But he wrote a book. It's entitled "Begin Again," and one of the lines in the book is, "What do you do when you've lost faith in the place you call home?" And I thought it was a really powerful question. But what he does in the book is he keeps writing. So I think that we all have something to contribute, even if we feel disillusioned by the current circumstances with Donald Trump, even if we feel broken by the fact that, we have the scenarios with Breonna Taylor, with Trayvon Martin, with George Floyd, and the list goes on and on and on and on. But I think that the message is to keep working, to keep fighting, to keep doing what you need to do to improve the quality of your life and the quality of the life of those who are going to come after you. We didn't get here on our own. We won't stay here on our own. So it's important that we work together with our family members, to Ted's point. So when we go out to vote, we have to make sure that we take 2 or 3 people with us. We not only have to hold elected officials accountable, but we have to hold ourselves accountable. And so I think that that's important going into it. So if you feel faithless, if you feel lost, if you feel disillusioned, keep working. Keep doing the stuff that you need to do in order to improve the quality of life of you, your family, your community.
I am so grateful to have had both of you on tonight. I'd like for everybody to give our fellows a hand clap. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much for being with us tonight. And I think, I'm not sure if it's in every state, but I believe now the mail-in ballots are prepaid. The postage has been prepaid, but in the event that it's not, Ted, you mentioned, make sure you have a stamp. But fellas, look, this has been certainly enlightening. It has certainly been engaging. And I know that our audience is leaving better knowing that Black votes matter. Every vote matters, and you must do your part. So thank you so very much. I'm so appreciative. And let me say in closing to King, thank you so very much for this platform, this opportunity to share. And those of you that want to give to Black Women Empowered, the information is there on the screen. You can give, and truly your donations certainly help keep the ministry going and help propel the ministry forward. Once again, to each of you, we're so grateful. We look forward to being with you again next time. I am Dr. T-Lynn Smith. I look forward to next time. God bless you. This has been My Political Faith.